Thanks, Susie. Thanks, Jane. I got them. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Trudy from Regional Development Australia, Darling Downs Southwest. Us and your local council, Western Downs Regional Council, partly fund the tool that we're going to show you through today. So we've got Kat from ID Profile here to show you through the tool that we fund and co-fund with the council. And 90% of what we're going to show you through today is publicly available. And then we're going to show you a couple of tools that you do need a little bit of additional training and a password to use. But I just want you to all know now, once we get to those tools, if it's something that you're going to need at a later date, you can email Tim, who is the admin at RDA email that you've all got, because he would have been sending you the stuff for today. Or you can actually get in touch with Lidovay, who's sitting here right next to me from Western Downs Regional Council, and she's got access to that tool as well. So she can get that sent through to you if you want any of the economic impact reports or the event impact reports. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Kat, but just for those of you who don't know about RDA, keep us in mind if you need those tools, or if you're trying to connect with grants, or if you need letters of support. Pretty much if you're going for grant funding or you're trying to progress a project, you should get in touch with us. So you've now got all of our details, but I can chat to you about that at a later date. And today what we're actually more about is Kat running you through this tool. So I'm going to hand over to Kat. She's going to share screen and ideally go live and take you on a tour of the tabs and the menus, and then show you also some of the data from your region and how to access it. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Hello. I'm going to share my screen, guys, and go straight into the Western Downs economic profile. So as Trudy mentioned, this is all publicly available. This is information that you guys can get online now and go through either the RDA website or through Economy ID to be able to access this data. And this is the type, this data here, and I'll actually take you through the community profile first. I like to start in the community profile because it does give us a really good background of what your community looks like, who your community is, who are the people that live here, and all of that information that you need in order to be able to support a grant application. So if you want to know how many people in your community are Indigenous, or what is how you live in your community, what are the qualifications of your community compared to Queensland or Australia or the rest of the Darling Downs region, you're able to access that online. So this is the community profile. Now, majority of this information, almost 99% of it, comes directly from the census. So that's why it's so important to fill out your census and make sure that you give as much accurate information as you can on that census, because it helps you and helps to guide both the council but also the federal and state government in terms of funding to ensure the correct development or infrastructure in particular communities. So straight away we move down and we can see a map of the RDA Darling Downs Southwest region. We can also see this great menu of items that you can find in the tool. So if you want information on occupations or the proficiency in English in your particular community because you're thinking about setting up a English speaking school or running programs out the library, looking at qualifications, highest level of schooling, dwelling types, you can come down here and you can find all of those individual data sets down below. You can also find them down here on the left-hand toolbar as well. Now, the first page I'm going to take you to is the population highlights page. And the reason for that is because it just gives me a really good overview of what your community looks like. And perhaps, what are some of the features of your community that stand out to someone like myself who might be coming to Dalby or, Toowoomba or Quilpie for the first time. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my drop down and I'm going to select the Western Downs Regional Council area. So you'll see there, if you guys are doing grants for anybody, any local government area across the Darling Downs region, you'll be able to see you can access any of that data for all of those LGAs. So we're going to go to the Western Downs Regional Council area and we can see population 34,579. declined by 3 from the previous year. So fairly steady population in the Western Downs region. We come down here and we get these tiles, and I love these tiles because straight away I can get a good idea of the types and styles of people that live in your region. Median age 37, a little bit younger than the rest of RDA Darling Downs and regional Queensland, but on par with Queensland. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander 5.6%, higher than Queensland, regional Queensland, Darling Downs Southwest. Couples with children we can see a little bit less than Queensland. Older couples without children, lone person households. So you can go through and have a look at all of these data sets. Overseas born 7%, much less than Queensland and regional Queensland. University qualifications, much lower as well. University attendance, participation rate. So there's lots of different data sets that you guys can see straight away to give you an idea of what type of community it is. You can also export this into PDF and print it out. So when you select PDF, you can send it to your email address and you'll get a readout of this information, which is quite good as well. The next place I normally go to is having a look at our 5-year age groups. This helps to talk to us about what type of projects and I guess products we might be able to, as a business, sell in the community. What is our demand for goods and services around age demographics? So this comes directly from the census question, what is the person's date of birth? Once again, guys, you can export this entire page into Word or PDF. When we come down here, we can see we've got our area, which is the Western Downs Regional Council area. And then we've also got our benchmark area. So that talks to us about who are we comparing ourselves to. So at the moment, we're saying, well, what does the Western Downs look like compared to the rest of the Darling Downs and Southwest region? But if you're going for a grant with the state or federal government, you will want to change that to whatever geography you're going for the grant. So if I'm going for a grant with the state government, I want to compare the Western Downs Regional Council area with Queensland. Okay, we first get our data table and you can export that into Excel or Word if you want the actual data table. But what we want is we really want to have a look at this visual so we can start to tell a story about the region. And straight away, I can see from this particular chart that we have this dominance around our younger people in our population. So if council's thinking about providing infrastructure, they're looking at this and they're saying, well, we've got a community of very young people. So, you know, we might be leaning towards things like providing skate parks or bike tracks or, you know, providing housing and dwellings for families in our community and that sort of thing. And that's all good and well because that's what our dominant features in our community are. And it's dominant particularly in comparison to Queensland as well. But when we move here and we look at our change in our age structure, so yes, we've got these dominant features, but what we want to look at is, well, how is our population changing over time? Because we also need to prepare for that change in our community as well. And we can see from 40 plus, we've got growth across all age demographics. So it's really important that whilst we're thinking about those dominant categories, we're also thinking about what this means moving forward and what programs or projects could we as a community provide to support the aging population in our community as well. And that might be things around, you know, going for a grant for, you know, using technology through the libraries or stuff like that, or how to use the internet, how to, you know, use Excel or different things like that, how to go online. So it's being able to think about, well, what sort of things do we need for that demographic moving forward as well. Down the bottom, you get this dominant and emerging group analysis. Now, that's also important to know that you can use all of that information in your grant applications. There's no copyright. You can just copy and paste that straight into your application as well. So that's our age groups. The next one that I like to look at is how do we live, and looking at our household summary. So this is thinking about, well, what sort of households do we have in our community? So what is the person's relationship to each other in the household? And we can come down here and we get our data table. You can export all of this information. You can also export your charts, and you can see here our most dominant housing household type is couples with children. But we've also got this couples without children. We've also got strong dominance there, and this lone person household, just a little bit higher than Queensland. So when we're looking at this, we're saying, okay, we're dominant in terms of couples with children. What we want to see, though, is what is our change over time? And we can see our change over time consists of one-parent families and lone person households. And we can actually see a reduced number of couples with children. Now, this is also important when we start to think about what housing developments we're providing in our community to support populations. So that's another really good one to look at, guys, and you get this dominant and emerging group analysis. If you are looking at a grant around qualifications, we also can look at our education profile, and we can see our qualifications here. So if there's something around skills and training, what is the highest level of qualification the person has completed? I'm going to go straight down to our charts, and we can see here majority no qualification. We can also see vocational, a little bit higher percentage than Queensland, but in terms of our bachelor degree or advanced diplomas, a little bit less. This is where we're seeing our change. So we can see growth in our vocational. We can also see growth in bachelor and advanced diplomas, but it's certainly something where, to think about in terms of going for grants and funding around qualifications. So we can see that dominant and emerging group analysis as well. So whilst this is a good sign, we've got reduced numbers of no qualification. It certainly is something that we need to think about when we look at, well, what does it mean around having no qualification? Does that contribute to, or is that contributing to higher unemployment or underemployment in our community as well? So certainly there's lots of different areas for you guys to look at. What we do, we can look at volunteering, our incomes. We can also have a look at our dwelling types, the types of housing that we're providing as well in the community. Another piece of information that I think is really interesting is our job seeker information. And this helps, this has been very helpful in a lot of grant applications at the moment to start to set the scene of what the impact of COVID has been on our community. So starting to talk about, well, COVID has actually had a significant impact on a number of regions, and this is how it's affected ours. Compared to Queensland as well. So we can look here and we can see our comparison month is March 2020. So March 2020 is really looking at that pre-COVID assessment of where we were at. And we can see in the Western Downs, we had 1,681 people accessing job seeker and youth allowance payments in the region. So that's your old, your old Oz study and unemployment benefit. And then in June 2021, we can see that number has increased to 1,855. So an additional 174 people accessing job seeker benefits in the community. We can also go back to have a look at when we're in the peak of COVID, what the additional number of people accessing that payment was. And on the Western Downs, it was 725 people from March to June were accessing job seeker or youth allowance payments in the community. So it's a really interesting little tool to keep an eye on, a little bit of data to keep an eye on. The other thing that you guys can do, guys, is you can actually, where am I here? Reports, here we go. You can actually download a report to print out yourselves. And this is great for grants as well, because you can start to look at exactly what you need to support your grant application. So if you need to be able to show, I want to be able to show the change in the birthplace over time. I also want to show our change in our qualifications. I want to talk about information across our entire households. You're able to pick those individual areas, and you can come down here, put your email address in, and send yourself that report in a PDF or a Word document. My suggestion would be to send it to yourself in a Word document, because you're getting everything. You're getting the data tables, the written information as well. So what you may just want is just the charts to be able to tell that story. So it's thinking about what you actually need to support your application. And when you come in here, guys, you can actually select any region. So those of you who I might be a grant writer or that sort of thing across a number of regions, you can use this for each of those regions as well. So that's our community profile. So it's fairly self-explanatory. Now we go into the economic profile. Now it's a little bit more complex. It's still as easy to use. So it's user-friendly, except it's just got more data sources. And the reason for that is because this doesn't just come directly from the census. This information is updated yearly. It uses the national and state accounts and an econometric model, which is developed by a group called NIA, so National Economics. Now, this uses data sources across the labour force survey, household expenditure survey, tax information, all sorts of data to be able to create local government economic modules, essentially. So the first place we go is our economic indicators, and we want to know how the economy has performed over, say, the last 10 years. We can come into this tool and we can have a look, and this is the RDA. So this is the last 19 years. We can see how the RDA, Darling Downs and Southwest region has performed, and we can see there was a little dip away between 2019 and 2020. And this data is for the previous financial year. So what happens is every year in November, December, we will get the data. And then by February, March, the data will be loaded into our sites, and we will be able to have a look at what has happened in the previous financial year. So we're up to June 2020 at the moment. We can once again drill down into the Western Downs region using the benchmark of Queensland. So let's have a look here at what's happened over time in the Western Downs, and we can see there's a lot of building activity in 13-14, and we can see how that has impacted and changed our GRP. And it's interesting that even during COVID, the Western Downs performed quite well, and that's mainly due to the industry makeup of the region compared to the rest of Queensland. And we can see here, the Western Downs compared to Queensland, we can see that fall away. It's still positive growth, but it's fallen from the peaks of previous years. And this down here will give you your actual numbers. So sometimes grant applications will ask you for information on how the economy is performing in your local region. And here you can grab the gross regional product, and you can also grab your local employment numbers. So over time, having a look at what's happening in terms of local employment in your region. And you can see here, once again, defying some of the odds of COVID, we can see some increase in employment, which once again, when you look at the amount of financial assistance provided during COVID, it's no surprise that employment and things like that weren't necessarily as affected as previous. And we can see there Western Downs not falling as hard as Queensland, and we've still had a positive change in terms of our local jobs. The next one we look at is building approvals, because building approvals also gives us a good idea of just exactly what perhaps we could be looking at moving forward. And we can see here in 13-14, we had some strong growth in building approvals. And we've also got this growth compared to the last, 4 years in the Western Downs, particularly around residential growth as well. And you can get your exact numbers there. So for any builders or, that real estate's online, you certainly can keep track of what's happening in terms of residential and non-residential building approvals. A new module that we have now is our quarterly economic indicators. And this really shows the effect of COVID. So whilst we've had positive growth in the Western Downs, we can certainly see the impact that COVID has had on our community. So when you're going for a grant application, they're saying, well, what has been the impact of COVID on your region? You can come down here and see we had a loss of 127 million in the COVID, what I call the COVID quarter, was that March to June quarter. And you can see there in terms of GRP, it was actually a higher fall than the rest of Queensland. And when we move down here, we can see the dip was actually for a harder fall than the rest of Queensland there as well in terms of our indexed GRP. when we come up here, we can actually change that indicator to local jobs. And we can see our fall in local jobs was almost, was 662, but you can see how that impact, the fall in GRP perhaps wasn't as strongly correlated to our jobs. So therefore we can see that some of that JobKeeper payment is what has certainly kept that GRP from falling as hard. So we can see our local jobs, and that's quarter on quarter. So the September quarter will be coming out shortly, and you're able to, this allows us to be able to track over time exactly what's happening in your region rather than waiting, because people are so, you know, require such timely information at the moment, simply because COVID has sort of overrun everything. Here we've got our economic value and we've got our value added. Now, this is where we're looking at what are our most productive industries in our community. So what industries are making the most money for us? What I normally do is I change our previous year to 18-19, and that's because we like to see, well, what's just happened over the previous year? Where has been the greatest change in profitability in our region? So what has really driven our recovery in particular? And we can see mining here has certainly driven a lot of our recovery. You can also see manufacturing, and this allows us to drop down, so that for those of you that may work in any of those sectors or are looking at, you know, delivering a grant for any of those sectors, you're able to get really detailed information on any sector in the economy on this tool. And you can look at how it's changed over time as well. Now you can see construction has fallen up until June. And if you actually look at it, construction's performing quite well across all of regional Queensland. But during that one quarter, when there were lockdowns, it has affected the numbers coming out in the model and in the work that NIA have done. So we can see here value added by industry sector. Come down and see certainly mining and construction, our biggest industries. And here we can see where we've had the greatest growth and the greatest fall away. So ag, forestry and fishing, no surprise, given that we were battling drought and bushfires just prior to COVID coming along. Then we've got our dominant and emerging group analysis, which once again, you guys can use that data in any of your grant applications and the like. So that's our value added. We can also do the same for our local employment. So if we want to see how that local employment has affected certain industries. So if you're going for a grant application and you want to show, well, in the public health sector or in the education and training sector, we've had a fall away in jobs, or in the accommodation and food services, we've lost valuable jobs in our community, you're able to show that through this tool as well. So you can see accommodation food services lost 235 jobs between 2018-19 and 19-20. So that's within accommodation and food and bev. So it's important to add those things into your applications to be able to say, well, actually, you know, our hospitality sector has been hit really, really hard. Our retail sector has also been hit hard across motor vehicle and motor vehicle parts, you know, all the way down to other store-based retailing. Food retailing's had a big hit there as well, fuel. So certainly COVID has hit those areas very hard. Education and training, adult and community and other education. So whether did you perhaps lose a TAFE or something around? No, just maybe some training providers there. Interesting. Public admin and safety. So it's being able to look at this and be able to say, okay, so how have we fared in terms of our jobs? Where did we gain our jobs and where did we lose them? And we can see we're jobs heavy in construction, ag, mining. When we move down here, we can see we lost most of our jobs, accommodation and retail, education and training as well. So they're our three big losers. So it's really thinking about if you need to use some of that information to showcase what those job losses are. I know Cairns Regional Council is using this information at the moment to showcase their jobs losses across transport, accommodation and retail because of the impact on the tourism industry. So then you've got your dominant and emerging group analysis below as well. Some other little bits of data that are worth looking at is sometimes if you guys are doing some a grant application on qualifications or upskilling or things like that in your community, you can actually get these key statistics for your local workforce. And you can see here, this just talks to us about across all your industries, how many male, how many are female, the age structure of the workforce, the occupations, full or part-time, how many people are educated, and you can do that industry based. So if I wanted to create an argument to say, well, we've got an aging workforce in our agricultural sector, I'd be able to look at this and say, okay, well, let's have a look at, you know, where bulk of our, you know, workforce sits in terms of our age demographics. And we can see 566 at age 55 to 64, and then we've got 65 years and over, and we can compare that to Queensland, which are actually performing probably better than Queensland, but we've added 57 people during that period to that 65 years and over category as well. So that's really interesting. But there's ways of being able to look at this and say, okay, I need to have a look at where that particular industry as a whole and be able to see, you know, how many people are educated in the sector, what they're earning, all of that sort of thing. Born overseas as well, that's interesting. Speaks a language other than English at home, an additional 70 people. So that's interesting because it's about saying, well, in the agricultural sector, we've actually got a lot of people, or a lot of additional people who are speaking a language other than English at home. Is that something that perhaps you know, there may be an opportunity to provide funding for English speaking to support employment in this locality? So there's those local workers. The next thing I'm going to show you is the economic impact model. And the economic impact model is the only part of the tool, the economic and the event impact calculator. Economic impact model and event impact calculator are the only two areas in the model that require a password. Okay, so they're password protected. And the reason for that is because most of the time we just need to be sure that you're putting in the right information so that you get the right outcome, the outcome that you want. And so whilst it's an easy model to use, it's the interpretation that is the difficult part for most people. So if we came on here and we said, okay, I want to measure, and most of the applications that you go for will ask for what is the construction phase impact and what is the operational phase impact of this project on the community. So the first thing we want to do is select our area. So this project is going to be happening in the Western Downs Regional Council area. This is the construction part of the project. So we've got our building construction sector. So what is the impact on the building construction sector? Then we've got sales or jobs. Now, majority of the time when we're talking about the construction phase, we're going to be talking about sales. Now, I just had a few good examples of why jobs would be the most appropriate measure, but normally it would be sales. So here we've got 3.1 million in sales for a community centre that's happening on the Western Downs, and we would submit that through the model. And this is where we start to interpret the model. So we can see here is our impact summary. Here is our starting position of the Western Downs Regional Council area. So we can see all this is telling me is that the current output of the building construction sector on the Western Downs is 96.5 million. For all industries, it's 13,408 million. So we start to look at this and we say that's just the starting position. So there's really no reason to necessarily use that information. Most of the time we're going to be living down here, which is our impacts on the Western Downs Regional Council area. And here we have our direct impact on the building construction sector, which is 3.1 million. Then we've got, which is the 3.1 million that we talked about before, that is our starting position, well, not our starting position, but the amount of money that we're putting into the project. Then we've got our industrial and our consumption impacts, also known as our indirect impacts. Our industrial impact is about how we, with that 3.1 million, the products and services that we would be buying as part of the impact to the project to get it delivered. And the impact of that is 0.88 million. So as that money moves through the economy, it creates more money. It pays wages and things like that. Through the consumption impact, we then have $200,000 worth of impact on the economy. So that's our consumption impact. The next bit talks to us about our total impact on the Western Downs regional economy, which is 4.18 million. So we've got all of those three added up to give us 4.18 million and 10 local jobs. Okay, the difference between 10 local jobs and 8 resident jobs is it's telling us it will create 10 jobs in the Western Down region, of which 8 of them will live locally. So 2 may be coming from Toowoomba, or they may be coming from the Maranoa region, or that sort of thing. So you've got people from outside of the region coming in to perform some of these works. And that's based on your journey to work data and your profile of your workers in each of the industries. So we can see here, that's our total impacts. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's what you need to put in your application when they say, what is the total impact on the Western Downs Regional Council area? Below that, we have our type 1 and type 2 multiplier. And that just tells me about how the money moves through the economy and how it contributes to the economy. The next bit is our impact on the Queensland economy. So if you are going for a grant with the state government, you will want to look at these numbers. My total impact on the Queensland economy is $4.98 million. So we started with 3.1, we've come to $4.98 million economic impact on the Queensland economy and 13 local jobs in Queensland. Total impact on the Australian economy is 6.22 million, of which 17 are local jobs in the Australian economy. Down below, you get all of the information and definitions that you need to answer any question in the grant application. What I will tell you is that if they ask you something different, so say, for example, if a grant application says, well, we want to know how many of those local jobs are going to be Indigenous workers, or if they're going to be youth workers, you can contact us and we will help you to be able to get that figure. So that's your construction phase component of your grant application. Then the next thing that you get is your operational phase. So they will say, what is the impact in the construction phase? And then they will say, what is the impact in the operational phase? Now, the operational phase of this project was 2 public administration officers were going to work in this particular building. And these were 2 new jobs. So this can't be just, oh, it's going to create 2 jobs. They're actually just 2 jobs that were in the other council building that are now moving across to that building. This is 2 additional jobs in public administration, and we can run that through the model as well. And we can see there our starting position for public administration at $85.9 million. Our direct impact is 0.23. Our industrial impact is 0.08. And our consumption impact is 0.06. Our total impact on the Western Downs Regional Council area for our operational phase is about 380,000. Then we see our type 1 and type 2 multiplier. And then we've got our total impact on the Queensland economy, it's 440,000, and our total impact on the Australian economy, which is 540,000. Okay, and once again, you get all of this information below to support your application. The other thing that you can use this tool for, guys, which I didn't actually mention in the last session, is if you are going to lose jobs in your community. So say, for example, if you're if there's going to be an industry shut down, or say, for example, we're going to lose 200 jobs in our local council or whatever it might be, we can actually measure what the economic impact of a loss of jobs is in your community as well. Some training organisations at the moment, given the skills shortages and things like that, have been looking at this to support applications around, well, if we don't fill these apprenticeships, what potentially could be the economic loss for our community? So it's just another way of looking at it. And I think it's quite clever to be able to, break down, well, not only what is going to be our economic gain, but what would be our economic loss if we didn't do these things. So really just another way to be able to think about it and think about your grant application and how you go about assessing that and that sort of thing. So that is our economic impact model. I'm going to ask if there's any questions at this point.
You should be able to just come off mute, guys, if any of you have a question.
No.
Cecil, come off mute and say something just so I know that it works.
Hello.
Oh, hello, we heard you.
Yeah, I unmuted the wrong mute button.
How many mute buttons did I try and put on you?
No, I had another Zoom meeting earlier today, so I had that still on.
Oh, okay, no worries. So it's definitely working. So did anyone else have any other questions for Kat while you've got her?
Trudy, yes. We will get the link to the video of this because I saw you recorded it.
Yes, we do. So you will get this link. And I know, Cecil, you were in the one we did previously for some of the council employees. So you'll get both.
Okay, cool.
So you
Fantastic.
get Kat, double time.
Yep, wonderful. Good.
Okay.
And
yes,
it's nice to see, another person from Livingston Shire. I miss walking my sausage dog on the beach there every day.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, so give Tim a day or two just to top and tail. Pretty much he chops off any of the fluffy stuff at the end or at the beginning. So you don't need to listen to us maybe setting stuff up and saying hi and things. And then he usually gets it out to everybody. So just give him probably 48 hours, maybe Thursday at the latest. You should have all received an email from Tim with the link, and you can go back in and have a look at this. But the main takeaway is it's all there. You can't break it. Just go in and you probably saw from Kat as she was touring around that all of those the subheadings down the side then has a drop down with even more information. So just go in there and have a look until you find the information that you want. But probably the key is being really clear on what's the criteria in the grant that you're trying to put a case together to answer. So be really clear on the criteria of a grant or of a funding. Or if it's not for grants, what's the argument that you're trying to put together, and actually use the data that supports that, and don't use everything in there because it's just too much. And then when you get stuck and you can't find it, that's what we're here for. So send an email through to Tim, admin@RDA, which you should all have that email now because he would have organized for you to dial into this to start with. So that's the main takeaway. And the RDA page has the summary of all the grants on it. And as you know, if you're progressing with something, we're always available for letter of support as well.
Yeah. And just the last thing, guys, you can actually come on here and print out an economic overview. So if you're time poor and you're sitting and you're going, look, I just want to print out all of that information that she just gave me, you can come into here, into our download section, go to reports, go to economic overview, and you can actually print out a lot of the information that I was just showing you online, your key statistics in your workforce, employment by industry, value add, all of those things that I talked about that might help you to be able to support your grant application. The other thing is always think about what are you trying, what is the story you're trying to tell? Okay, and if you're thinking about, well, this is what I'm hearing and this is what I think the story I'd like to tell, and if you get confused about what data to use in order to be able to support that application, that's where Tim, Trudy and I can help you, and Leader Bay from Council as well, to be able to figure out what data you might need to be able to make sure that application can be as you know, as acceptable as it can be. So it's really important that you just remember that we're here to support you guys. We want to see this region get as much government funding as it possibly can, because it creates jobs for you guys. But yeah, you can come on here, you can get an economic overview. You can also get industry sector reports. So if you're looking at, say, for example, the healthcare sector, or, oh, my battery's running low. Or you're looking at, or you just want to look at agriculture, for example, you're able to do that and get all of those drop downs and provide that to yourself in a Word or PDF document. So yeah.
Thanks, Kat. You're awesome. We love having you. Thank you for the time.